Well, hello and welcome to the Covenantized Church Leaders Educational Roundtable. I'm your co-host and co-moderator, Amanda Zurface. I serve as the Catholic Church Outreach Specialist for Covenantized, and I am joined by my colleague, Rob Stoddard.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
So thank you for taking the time to join us today to begin a new series of educational roundtables for church leaders like yourselves. It's our goal to equip you on the tough topics of pornography, internet usage, and accountability. All topics that we know you are facing in the day-to-day, in the life of your ministry and work and communities of faith. So we really do hope these virtual roundtables are a blessing to you and your communities at large. So today we will spend time discussing our present culture regarding where we are with technology and how to protect and guide and inform children in our roles as church leaders. We hope that you will leave today with a deeper knowledge of where we are as a culture in the internet age, and with a renewed understanding as to why we need to be addressing pornography and internet usage in our ministry roles as we serve marriages and families. And we also hope to send you away with practical tips on how to serve families well on tough and oftentimes even embarrassing topics like pornography exposure and having ongoing conversations with their children. And also we have a free resource for you at the end of today's roundtable. So we hope you'll stay tuned to learn more about it. And just to make sure we're helping you as best as we can on today's back to school technology discussion, we do have a chat box where you can submit your questions. So feel free to drop your questions on the topic or even share your struggles and experiences with us who are gathered here today, and we'll answer your questions throughout the conversation. And also we know that sometimes we can focus more on note-taking than on the presentation itself. So we just want to give you a little bit of encouragement and to say, don't worry about taking notes, and that we'll send you today's roundtable recording. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our guest speaker who will talk about important topics, again, regarding back to school technology. Our presenter today is Chris McKenna. He is the founder of Protect Young Eyes, and he is a man with never-ending energy when it comes to fighting for the safety and protection of children. Chris practices his internet safety tips on his 4 amazing children and is regularly featured on news, radio, and podcasts for his research. His 2019 U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee testimony was the catalyst for draft legislation and ongoing discussion that could radically change online child protection laws and earned Protect Young Eyes the National Catholic Sexual Exploitation Dignity Defense Alert Award in 2020. The Protect Young Eyes team has performed over 1,300 presentations at schools, churches, and nonprofits, and was featured in the Childhood 2.0 movie. When not leading Protect Young Eyes, Chris is the digital marketing manager for Covenant Eyes. So we also have the joy to serve with him. So thank you, Chris, for being with us.
Thanks, Amanda. Hey, Rob. Good to see you here and to have this really necessary and critical conversation. I'm sure we could talk for days, and I'm sure some of you have days of questions as it pertains to technology, but we'll start the conversation here, and I think we'll have a good time doing it. So
sounds good. Yeah, Chris, thank you so much for joining us. It's going to be good. So let's get this started. Chris, let me start with just kind of a broader topic and start there, and then we'll narrow down a little bit. But let's start talking about a little bit with culture. You know, throughout history, the pace of change with culture, it's always changing, always adapting. Our attitudes, our morals, our technology, all of those things are continuing to change. And if you know anything about history, you know, every generation feels like doom and gloom, that things are changing so fast and so difficult and quite often, there are many great things that happen in culture, of course, but there are also things that do take us away from Christ a little bit as a church and as individuals. And we sense those things and we worry about those things. So I'd like to just start out by asking you, the pace of change today in culture seems to be, on caffeine. It is just turning now so fast. I think you look back, 2007, the first iPhone came out. That's when we had now the internet right in our pocket. And so many things have just spiraled from there in terms of technology. And that has led to changes in just attitudes and in morality and some things. And so if we can just start, if you would, give us a little bit of your take and your insight on this quicker change of pace and culture that we're seeing now, but also, why is it so important for church leaders and families to be aware of this, and what can they do?
Well, I'll start off with a statement that's like this, Rob. If we don't talk to our kids in our parishes, in our schools, or in our churches about all the things that no one talked to us about when we were growing up, then Dr. Google, Dr. TikTok, and Dr. YouTube will, and their office hours are 24/7. So I just finished a 2.5-hour professional development session with the Diocese of Baton Rouge. And in that, I went through our mental health, technology, and kids module. We have multiple modules that we do with parishes and dioceses and churches all over the country. And this module focuses on the idea that unless you understand what's happening neurologically in our young people, you'll never understand why they make some of the choices that they do on these awesome devices. And through these awesome devices, we now have not just ways to communicate, but ways that culture is trying to communicate to our children. And one of the things that I share with them is we go through what are the 4 layers of identity formation that all humans go through, right? I have somebody that's lost video here. Are you guys hearing me okay? Everyone just wants to comment there. If it's coming through for you, great, or maybe it's isolated, but I'd love to make sure if everybody can still hear us okay. What I was going to say is in these layers of identity formation, when I think about when I was growing up, and that's a whole separate presentation that we do just on those 4 layers. I'm not going to do that now, Rob, but loud and clear. Awesome. Thank you so much. Arlene, good to see you. I see you in the chat there. I love seeing all my friends that I recognize here, names and faces, not faces, but names of people that I recognize. So great to hear everybody and see everybody here. But when I was growing up, here I am, a man in my 40s. I had big questions about where I belonged and what my identity was and who I wanted to be. And that's really important in those tween and teen years, because when the 3 parts of their brain, that limbic part of their brain is on fire during adolescence. It's socially sensitive. It's very reward sensitive. And it's asking a very critical question that all mammals ask at some level, but humans ask it at a different level because we were created differently. And that is, am I loved? Every human at some point, particularly tweens and teens, ask that question of, am I loved? And therefore you seek answers to that question because you desperately want to know the answer to it. And it used to be when I was growing up, when we were asking that question back in the 80s or the 90s, right? There were only so many ways, so many sources of answers that I could get to in my search for connection with others that would help answer that question for me, right? It was at church, it was at youth group, it was with family and friends, it was in my neighborhood, in my community. And then came along MTV and we thought the whole world was going to rot because now we've got MTV speaking into the lives of kids. And I'll be honest, at that time, it was a bit of a force. But there was a fairly limited number of answers or voices or mirrors that young people were looking at. When they were asking that question, they were looking for a reflection back of what's the answer, all right? And so I have this really powerful illustration that I put up on screens when I talk to parents that shows me and these 4 or 5 mirrors. That was about it. That was speaking into my questions about who I was and what I was searching in that identity. Now, what we've done, and the slide that I then put in front of them is this slide of like 1,000 mirrors. And on these mirrors, Rob, is the logo for TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat and Saturn and YouTube and all of the apps that we've put in front of our kids. We have put 1,000 answers from 10,000 people who literally do not care about the hearts and minds of our kiddos. And we wonder why they're so confused. And we wonder why so many of them have questions about who they are, where they belong, how I fit into this world. What does God want for me? Right? Friends, I am telling you, the 14-year-old version of you in front of 1,000 mirrors would feel as much confusion and distortion and chaos as they do. Because 14-year-old questions and 14-year-old brains are no different in 2023 than they were in 1988. It's just what we've put in front of them is different. So when I see young people struggle with the pace of change, struggle with the pressures of constant news and constant messages from a million influencers who literally don't know them and literally don't care, I say to myself, Rob, that's not their fault. That we've put these devices, we've put these mirrors, we've put these apps, we've put these digital spaces in front of developing precious brains who, when they're asking life's most critical questions, need fewer voices and not more. They need voices that care about them and not always the voice of 1,000 different versions of culture. It's not just that culture is changing. It's now we have the ability to hear 1,000 opinions from 1,000 people about what their version of culture is. I got to tell you, that is a ridiculously confusing thing to grow up in. So if we walk away with nothing else from this conversation, I want it to be with a 10 times version of the empathy that we had when we started. Because it is a difficult, pressure-filled time to grow up. And I think when we understand that a little bit better, and then we see young people struggling, and we see young people who are making bad choices online, if we can then approach them with a little more understanding and a little more empathy in the midst of that chaos that they're experiencing, in the midst of that culture that is moving 1,000 miles a minute, I think they're more willing to have some good and honest conversations, and we can enter into their world and help them when so much just feels like it's out of order.
Wow, Chris, thanks. That is a different perspective than we typically hear, and that makes so much sense. And yeah, think about it from a standpoint of what the kids are going through. It really turns that on its head a little bit. Yeah. Well, great. I do want to take this opportunity to remind you, please do put in some questions here for Chris. And as we go along, we'd love to interact with you as much as we can and answer your questions and have Chris answer some of your questions. But Chris, let's take this down another level. Let's talk. Most of the people on here are leaders, are church leaders, ministry leaders, parish leaders. Let's talk a little bit to them about some essential questions that they really need to look at in the church and for themselves when they're talking about how do I help families in the church deal with all of these digital risks. What are some of the key things that churches and church leaders really need to think about?
Sure. Boy, there's 100 things, but I want to boil it down to just a couple, because I would love for those who are participating now or who listen to this later, that I want people who come to us with questions and concerns to feel empowered and not overwhelmed. It's so easy to feel overwhelmed in the digital age. So I want to make this sort of as practical as possible, so that in the next 48 hours between now and the weekend, there are some things that you can do, both as a leader professionally or maybe even personally. There's a lot of parents that are on this call also. Rob and Amanda, we tend to talk about at Protect Young Eyes 2 big buckets of solutions. There are practical, like technical solutions, and then there are relational solutions. Okay, I'm a big framework guy. I need to put things sort of big and hairy like the internet in a framework. So it helps me think about stuff. So that's a couple of categories we can talk about stuff. There's relational solutions and there's technical solutions. There are also spiritual solutions and then practical solutions. Okay, we obviously pray for the hearts of our kids, but then we can't just pray porn out of their life. We have to have some practical solutions in place. All right. So I'm just kind of putting that out there. I'm going to talk about some ideas. I'm going to place them into a couple of bigger buckets just so that we have sort of a frame to put around them. Okay. So I would invite all ministry leaders to think about what are the both relational and the technical ways that you can not only take care of your ministries, your places of worship, but also your families. I want to make sure that all of your families have certain conversations with their children, that especially parents of elementary school and junior high kids, that parents are reminding their children beyond any doubt that no matter what happens to them online, that they can always, irrevocably, unconditionally land safely and softly with them. Always. Because the enemy, in that moment of whatever happens, is going to convince children that they're going to get in trouble for telling a trusted adult. I hear this all the time when it comes to like safe environments training and other things that happen within the Catholic Church, that what we need to do, and not just telling kids that, Rob, but I want us to give our parents practical tools to practice that. It's not enough just to say to a kid, hey, if you see porn or if you see somebody naked on the computer, come and tell me. Because to a kid, that's an abstract idea. And in that 3 functional areas of the brain, that neocortex that's trying to make executive decisions, it's not plugged in yet. We need to make it as tangible as possible. So when you say to a child, and this is instructions that we give to families, it's not just read a book and talk about what to do when you see porn. It's literally, if you are on the Chromebook, here's what we're going to do. I want you to sit at the kitchen table, and I'm going to put the Chromebook in front of you. And I'm going to go upstairs. But I want you, when I say go, amazing 8-year-old son or daughter of mine, I want you to pretend that you saw something uncomfortable on the screen. You saw something that gave you that little funny feeling in your belly that something's not quite right. That's Holy Spirit radar. Listen to that thing, okay? And when I say go upstairs, I want to have you put the screen down. That's put it down. And I want you to walk up the stairs, knock on my bedroom door, and say, Mom, I saw something on the Chromebook that really bothers me. Have them practice that and do that, right? That's a relational way. This isn't software, right, which Covenant Eyes excels in. This isn't a router, which I also want, I'll get to in just a minute. This is a relational way, and those buckets of technical and relational. This is a relational way to invite your child to know exactly what to do when they see something online that can harm them, right? And I want them to do that. And what I say to parents, even on top of that, with that practice or with those conversations, is if your kids aren't finishing your sentences, if your kids aren't rolling their eyes at you when it comes to some of these things, then you're not doing it enough. You're not practicing it enough. You're not saying it enough, right? I want that to be the confidence that parents have that you're ministering to. They know how to do some of those things. And Covenant Eyes has some of those tools. We have Protect Young Eyes has some of those tools, whether it's scripts or talking points, those kinds of things. So those are some just relational ideas and thoughts that I want just our parents to be dripping into the lives of their kids, not drowning. It's not go home and have 1 2-hour conversation because you've duct taped your child to a chair and you're just reading, or you're going to hit play on this sort of webinar later and let your kid listen to it. No. That's not what I want. I want us to be dripping digital ideas into the lives of our kids. Something that we say related to the issue of pornography, Rob and Amanda, is 10 before 10. I want 10 solid conversations about pornography before age 10. And that sounds scary to ministry leaders. That sounds scary to parents and professionals, but that's because you're misinterpreting what I mean by talk about porn. You don't have to say the word to have a porn talk. You're going to be driving down the road. You're in the drop-off line. You're waiting to drop your kid off in front of school. Turn down the radio. It's a captive audience, shoulder to shoulder. They're buckled in. They're not going anywhere. And I love shoulder to shoulder because that means they're less stressed by not staring at them and having a serious conversation, right? And you say to your son or daughter, you know what, if you ever saw anything on a screen, something connected to the internet that bothered you, I just want you to know that you'll never be in trouble for bringing that to me. I care about you deeply, okay? Turn up the radio and keep driving. That's a porn talk, right? Like, you've invited them into telling you about something they see online. That counts, right? And so I think we freak ourselves out and talk ourselves out of all kinds of awesome opportunities if we're just vigilant and open and praying for those little windows of awareness. Oh yeah, say something, just drip it in. Just drip it into their life. And I would say that's true for preschool, elementary, middle, or high school. It doesn't stop when they get to high school. In fact, relationally, because you've got less controls on stuff, I want us relationally connected to them, to look at those amazing 16 and 17-year-old sons and daughters of mine and say, you know what? There's stuff out there that's tough. There's stuff out there as your dad that I don't want to bump into either. I just want you to know that you can bring that to me. No matter what you've seen or done, my love for you will never change. I want them to hear that about 10 times a day, but for now, let's just make it happen a few times, okay? Those are some of the relational things that I want all of us to be sort of asking ourselves. So everybody on this, ask yourself personally, and do your parents, have they made it abundantly clear to the children in their lives that all of them can land safely and softly with the adults that care about them? It's like an essential question. And those are just some of the practical ways that we can make sure that those kids know the answer to that question is yes.
Perfect, Chris. Thanks. That makes so much sense. We've got a question here, and I think this fits right here with kind of what you were talking about. So a lot of what you were describing is really just ongoing mentoring, discipleship of our kids around this area. One of our guests asked this question, though. So how does a person exposed to pornography and sex acts at age 8, maybe one of our kids, how do we unmess them up? So when they're struggling in that, what's the answer there? Certainly the preventative things are out the window at this point to some extent. I mean, we always need to do that, but we need to address this specific issue. So how do we do that?
Yeah, and if individuals were to come to our website, we have a post that we've written, Rob, at Protect Young Eyes, that's labeled "My kid is caught up in porn or sexting. Now what?" And it's sort of that now what step that I think you're pressing into there. And I think the very first thing that I would say to that parent, and I even want to back up just a little bit, and I think this points to something really important, so that we respond the way that I want us to respond. I would love for everybody that watches this now or later, make a list of all of the horrible things that you hope digitally never happen to your children online. And then I want you to do two things. I want you to go into your bedroom and read that list, look in a mirror, and then repeat after me. I'm not going to freak out. 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 Okay. The second thing is I want you to try to find in a preventative way, an age appropriate way to talk about all of those things with all of your children. All right. But we're at the point where you said there's something has happened, but it points to the first thing I wanted us to practice, right? Practice isn't just good for them. It's good for us. You have a millisecond after that has been exposed or disclosed for them to know whether or not they're still okay. I get emotional thinking about it because in that moment, we have the opportunity to either treat them like Jesus or not. Treat them the way that Jesus treats us in our mess and our filth and our sin or not. What they don't need in that moment is a reminder of what they've done wrong. I guarantee they already know, and the enemy has made sure of it. Our best response right then is one with a smile, with a, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry that I wasn't there to prevent that. This is on me. And we see them as the victim in that situation instead of the criminal. Our children are victims of our pornified culture. I know they bumble and stumble into it from time to time, but if you were handed a Chromebook, you would have bumbled and stumbled into it too. Like when you think about the way it is today, imagine having a textbook that every third page, your history textbook as a sixth grader, there was something that said explicit content underneath, just don't look. And it had a page over it, but you were just invited not to look. And you had to go to the next page to get to what you had to do for school. That's kind of like a Chromebook with a browser today. And we just expect kids not to run into this stuff. I just want them to know beyond any doubt that in that moment, they did nothing wrong, even if they did. Right? In John chapter 1, we're invited, and I know I fail at this miserably, but to find this balance between grace and truth. Jesus was the perfect embodiment of grace and truth. And I think the order there in the digital age is super, super important. There are things in parenting that you lead with truth. Don't cross the highway, don't touch the stove, and don't stab yourself with a pencil. Whatever's on that truth list. Okay, pretty black and white. Don't do those things. On the other hand, there are things that I think are necessary to lead with grace. They first need to know they're going to be okay, and then they need to know what the consequence is, right? There is consequence for certain behaviors. But if they first don't know at a heart level they're going to be okay, then they'll never hear that they're still loved. They'll never hear that. I could show you the string. I have a mom. It was just 2 weeks ago. I'm trying to go to bed because I had a 5 a.m. flight and I needed to get up at the crack of dawn, Rob, at like 4 a.m. to get to the airport. And at midnight, I get this DM through Instagram from a mom whose 13-year-old son had just sent a nude photo of himself via Snapchat to a stranger and was now being extorted through Snapchat. And at one point I asked, is he still awake? And she's like, yes. And I said, can I message with him on your phone? And so then me and this 13-year-old boy had a conversation. And before I typed one word, he said to me, is this going to go away? Am I going to be okay? Like, he just desperately wanted to know that this wasn't the end of his life, that there was hope and forgiveness for him after this. And it was just evidence to me that that's what they need in that moment. They need that. So and we'll, then you get to, okay, show me how, show me where it happened. Then we move from compassion to curiosity. I want to know with curiosity what they did and how they got there so that we can close that door and we can prevent that thing from happening to them. So those are like of 3 C words, right, that I want us to either choose or not choose. I want us to choose compassion and curiosity and leave condemnation at the door. They don't need that in that moment, especially with the heart issue of pornography. Because at the end of the day, when you understand the brain, this is why we work at Protecting Eyes so hard about teaching parents and ministry leaders to understand neurologically child development. Because when you understand child development, you understand that when young people are developing neurologically, they have mirror neurons, which means they want to do the things that they see, and they compulsively can't stop some of the things that they see with their eyes. We love that they're curious and they learn from us, and sometimes embarrassingly copy the things that we say and do. That is created in them developmentally. And then you see how technology weaponizes that creative goodness inside of them. And I think when we understand those things, then it's easier to respond with compassion. It's easier to respond with curiosity. It's easier to respond with empathy because we've learned some of those things. So that's why we work hard on teaching about the brain, so that then leads us into responding, at least a higher probability of responding in some of these ways.
Yeah, so important. That's good. That's good feedback, Chris. Thanks. Just want to let you know, in a minute we're going to talk about resources. We've gotten a few questions about some resources, so we're going to go through some of those things. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
But before we get off this topic, Amanda, I think we've got a few other questions that kind of relate to what Chris has been talking about. Do we want to dive into some of those right now?
Absolutely. So very moving, Chris. Thank you so much. So Chris, you talked a little bit about age and when to be having these conversations. You even mentioned the 10 before 10, which is just clever, and you can keep hold of that as a parent and as an educator. So we do have a couple of gentlemen here who have asked about just what ages to start having these conversations, and even what ages should our children have access to apps like TikTok and YouTube and Google. So I don't know if you would be able to speak into those for us today.
Yeah, the age question is a really popular one, and we really want to know the answer because it's easy to parent to a number. But I wish it was that quantifiable. but kids are different and every situation is a little bit different. But a few just general principles that I would share with the audience here is that personally, I have done over 800 presentations over the past 8 years, Amanda. And I've heard a lot of things from a lot of parents all over the world. But there's one thing I've never been told. I've never had a parent come up to me and say, Chris, I screwed up. I gave my kid Snapchat too late. Darn it. I am so sorry about that. Right? So one of the things that we believe very strongly at Protect Young Eyes is delay is the way. That's our hashtag. I know you see me use that, and others who follow us have seen us use that. That's because I think the number one way to prevent harm in the lives of our kids is to delay the acquisition of digital spaces and digital devices that were never designed for them in the first place. If you want, just my number one and number two ways to protect childhood is to delay addictive technology and remove personal digital devices from schools. Like, that's it. If we get those two things right, I think we mitigate a ton of harm, because I have so many stories of kids who are showing other kids stuff on buses and lunches and passing times and all that stuff. That's a separate conversation. But I want us to delay addictive technologies as much as possible, because having sat across the table in DC from some of the CEOs and creators of these digital spaces, they were not designed with your children in mind. Now, we have the benefit of a few devices today that are. When my child, okay, hold on, my son's middle school is calling me. Rob or Amanda, could you take over for just a minute? Because they never call unless there's something. I want to take this call for just a minute. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. You know, we certainly, there's a lot of questions about locking down the devices and those types of things. In general, we get that asset question quite often too here at Covenant Eyes. And certainly we want to make the distinction when kids are young. We do need to be overprotective with, with what they're getting access to and what they're able to do and see online. And Chris just spoke to that. We talked a little bit about that. But certainly as kids are getting older, junior high into high school, often we've got to get them ready for when they're going to leave the nest, when they're going to leave the home. And that's really where we really want to begin to open things up for them and allow them to begin to experience this on their own, be able to begin to really handle and understand how to be accountable with the internet and with these sites that they're on. And it's a great time to really, as Chris talked about, just have those conversations with them about why, we need to understand this and what God wants of us sexually in with relationships, and begin to teach them. So when they're ready to leave the home, this is something they know how to handle and can handle it themselves, and why. And so we've run into too many people who really try to block things down until the kids are 18 and they head off. And we just like to encourage schools and churches to really embrace that issue of teaching accountability and helping kids understand how to use this technology. Amanda, I'm sure you've run into that question too. Anything you want to add along that lines?
Absolutely, Rob. Yeah, thank you so much. I think Anthony posed a really good comment here that the trouble is there's no 100% way to completely block everything possible, right? Filtering does not replace positive and loving parenting. And I think that's important to note in this presentation, and as you work with marriages and families, that no filtering can take the place of the love and care of a parent. And Chris, I think, spoke so well into that. Just if we can walk away with anything from this presentation today, is an increased understanding of the empathy that we need to have for our children and the children that we serve. Chris will, I'm sure, speak more into this as we go, but he already has done so well to speak into the importance of having the ongoing conversations with kids. And there's no replacement for that. And again, I think that the 10 before 10 was very clever, and you can hold on to that and remember that when you're speaking and equipping parents.
Great, Amanda. That's perfect. Another, Chris, are you everything okay?
Yeah. I'll stay on as long as I can. Then I have to actually go take care of my son. So I've got about 10 more minutes that I can be on. I really apologize about that.
No problem, that's life. That's life, right? We all been
Absolutely.
there. Hey, while we got you, Chris, let's just then talk a little bit about some of the resources that are out there for church leaders and ministry leaders that they can really use to help families. I think that would be helpful to talk about.
Yeah. So, I had come up with, and I think this is what you're referring to, Rob, 5 essential questions. Is that the around ministry leaders there, or do you want to jump right into some resources for them?
Well, I think if you've got time, go ahead and go through the 5, and then if you can list some of the resources, we'll talk about some of the Covenant Eyes resources in a bit. So.
Yeah, I know you've got quite a bit you want to go through there. I guess what I would say is for ministry leaders here is, your parents are really busy. When it comes to resourcing them, look for opportunities to meet them where they are. And so sometimes what I'll say is there are certain ceremonies or rhythms of ministry where we can intersect and give parents resources that are helpful. In the Catholic Church, there are sacramental rhythms that maybe is a part of some of the classes and the programs that are taking place. This is where you can introduce some ideas around protecting children better online. There are also programs, I know that Amanda you'll get to, whether it's Safe Haven Sunday or others, where we're allowing parents to connect with things that are sent to them directly. We know that parents are busy, and we want to enter into that. The ways that we resource parents, Rob and Amanda, is we actually will come and we do talks all over the country where we present to groups of parents and to students. Next week on Monday and Tuesday, I'll be up in the Diocese of Gaylord speaking at St. Francis and St. Mary's up there. I'll speak to K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and then our parents that night. And the same thing the next day, kind of rinse and repeat. We want to be there in front, giving kids those tools that they know. Yes, we need parents to have conversations with them, but kids aren't always surrounded by parents who are there to guide them in what they do. And so we want kids to have tips in their digital tool belt to know exactly what to do when things come up. And so we're big on equipping the actual parents themselves. We have a community, a private community that we have created where parents can come together and to meet each other and to talk and to share some of their questions and concerns about these critical issues, because it can feel intimidating. You can sometimes feel like the only parent who is dealing with some of these issues, and that's just simply not true. I guarantee I've had enough conversations that's simply not true. And so we want to come alongside, and I promote widely. I've used Covenant Eyes for years. You two know that because I work with you. It's a part of my own recovery from pornography. I was exposed to pornography as a child, and that led to an adult compulsive use of pornography that I pulled into my marriage. Thought, no problem, not hurting anybody. One of the primary lies of pornography is that you're not hurting anybody, but finally came clean and exposed that issue to Andrea, where we could come clean about that. And so I know how isolating that can feel. And I know that parents sometimes feel like you're the only ones who have dealt with that, but that's simply not true. And so to connect you with other parents, to connect you with individuals like myself who have walked that road, right? Who know what it's like to use some of that software and how to have those conversations. That's the resource that we want, to bring. And obviously Covenant Eyes is one of those I call them like my 5. I have like 5 very practical resources. Unless you've been vetted and used by me, I'm not going to recommend you. And Covenant Eyes is definitely one of those, but also the Griffin router, a real practical tool as parents simply underestimate the power of their home network and all the Chromebooks and gaming devices and tablets and smart TVs, which are really just big smartphones hanging on the wall these days, right? Things that are connected to Wi-Fi. How controlled is your router so that you're stopping the filth before it even enters the home? That if a child is curiously searching for things they shouldn't because of something they heard, they can't even get there because it's blocked on the Wi-Fi in the first place, right? Because there's all kinds of hidden browsers, even on Xboxes, even on PlayStations, right? So that's so important. So there's some of the practical things that I would offer to the leaders and to the parents here.
Excellent, thanks. Do you still have time for a couple more questions here, or do you need to run?
I have 3 minutes. Let's do what we can. And I'm going to drop a blog post in because routers are one of those places that you are intimidated. It's a technical thing. So I have a post that explains if your internet service provider gave you one, or if you're going, hey, wait a minute, what's a modem? I don't know. I can help you. Griffin is what we recommend. And I am going to give you sort of a roadmap for making that decision, because maybe you have an internet service provider that is said you have to use ours. AT&T is notorious for saying you have to use our 2-wire router. So how do you function in that situation? And that post will help you do that. I'll pull that up while you're asking a question, Rob. Go for it.
All right. We had one question. This kind of relates to resources for leaders to give to parents, but I'm sure many ministry leaders have run into this, but what do you do when parents don't really believe that the Snapchat, TikTok, all of these apps and things are really that bad for kids? When the parents really don't understand the issue, how do you as a ministry leader kind of help that parent see the dangers that are there?
Oh, this is going to sound horribly uncompassionate for a minute. Can I go there?
Go for it.
I love them, but I'm not going to expend a ton of effort trying to convince them. Because I don't think that that's fruitful time. Instead, I'm going to focus heavily on parents who do want to listen and give them more. I'm going to find parents who care but are confused, and I'm going to resolve their confusion. And then hopefully create enough momentum with those two groups that the other group over time feels like the minority and they jump on board. But if I'm constantly saying you're wrong and I'm right, and you need to take TikTok out of the life of your kid and these things, we just typically as humans don't respond well to that. So I think our responsibility is to drip that information out there in as non-judgmental of a way as possible, and focus heavily on parents who have bought in and are trying, so that we create a larger pool of them that I hope infects the others in a good, positive, God-honoring way. So that's what I would say. And as ministry leaders, I think it's our responsibility to offer and to put together nights and to offer the resources out there. And then for those who buy into it, really focus in on them, really equip them, really empower them, and maybe they become some of the internal cheerleaders. So it's not just you as the leader who are saying these things. Now you have other people, almost like a little mini internal ambassador program, that are saying those kinds of things. That's what my approach would be. I hope that doesn't sound uncaring in any way. It's just, I've just come to stop spending a lot of emotional and mental time and energy on parents who aren't going to care about what I say. I love them. And the minute they show up and want assistance, I will fling the doors open and help them. But until then, I can't force them to believe the things that I've discovered.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, we run into it on the individual side, unless somebody is to a point or a place where they really want help and are ready for it.
That's right.
If they're not, there's nothing we can do for them at that point until they get to that point. And so yeah, it's hard advice, but good advice. So,
yeah, tough.
All right, Chris. Well, you have to run, which is no problem. We understand, and we'll catch you again at another time. But thank you so much for joining us. Your insight, your knowledge is just off the charts. And so if we could, maybe if there are some questions on here that we don't get to, because I don't think we're going to get through a lot, maybe we can connect and answer some of those and put that out with our recording, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, no, what I would love to do, Rob, is let's grab all of those questions. I'd be happy to type up answers, things I would have said here live, And let's make sure that everybody here who is participating gets answers to those. But I think you're now able to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the resources that Covenant Eyes has that can help specifically with the issue of pornography.
Yeah.
Anybody can come to protectingeyes.com, fill out the form. Michelle, my assistant, will make sure that if you think of something afterwards, we will do our best to help. So thank you for this chance to talk. And I'm so sorry to have to run.
No apologies needed. All right, Chris, well, take care. Thanks.
God bless everybody. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. Well, again, apologize for that. Unfortunately, Chris has to run, but would like to take just these last, 10, 15 minutes. We can answer some questions. Would love to do that. I'd love to share a little bit of some of the resources that Covenant Eyes can help with. Let me just start first with, we are approached by ministry leaders all the time, day in and day out, really looking for ways to help in this area, in these conversations. And I will just start with, if Amanda, if you could put this in the chat there, we have a site that is dedicated to the leaders, both Catholic and as well as Christian churches, just with resources for you as leaders to help both yourself and your staff, as well as the individuals that you're working with, whether it's an individual, a man, a woman, couples, families, and young kids, and like I said, as well as your staff. And there's resources in there that you'll find that you'll be able to pass on. And, some of them are more educational, some are more recovery focused, but that would be a great place to start and find some things. The main thing, though, we'd like to kind of leave you with today, which is for families in the church. And I'll turn this over to Amanda. Maybe she can talk through this a little bit, but it's our Safe Haven Sunday materials. And so, Amanda, with that, you want to share that a little bit of what that's all about?
Absolutely. We are so passionate about Safe Haven Sunday at Covenant Eyes. We have been working on this initiative for about 7 years, and with the goal to help protect children and adults in the homes and to make the home a safe haven. That is really our goal with this initiative. And it's a free resource, and it's an offering available to both the Christian churches and the Catholic Christian Church. And it's a weekend really set aside by dioceses and parishes and churches in all communities to really address the issue of pornography in a public space, either during the Mass or the Christian service when the community is gathered together. And it's where you share teaching and resources that really protect the individuals and marriages and families and making all homes a safe haven. So the initiative, again, is free to implement, and we have a committed website as well for this initiative, and we will post it also in the chat too. But currently, the initiative is a 4-year initiative that you can implement, and each year addresses a different theme, whether that's protecting and guiding the children online, being able to have the difficult conversations that Chris mentioned, and just to make sure that it's an ongoing conversation. So we provide those guides on how to have those hard conversations, as well as what it truly means to be connected. Chris, at the very beginning of this presentation, talked about how kids are just thirsting to know that they are loved and that they are protected and that they're going to be okay. And so these resources also address how to help children feel that love, feel that safety. And we also, in our Year 4 resource for Safe Haven Sunday, are addressing fathers and how to help them overcome their struggle, as well as married couples. So these resources are so full and just really fruitful, and we're working with really hundreds of churches around the country to be able to implement this initiative, and we've seen a great deal of success, and we think it'll be a real blessing to you and your community.
Good. Thank you very much, Amanda. Yeah, so check that out. We'll certainly post that link. And again, as Amanda had mentioned earlier, we'll be sending out the recording of this, and it will have those links and that material in there for you to follow up on. But anyway, we know there's so many questions out there, and there's so much help that's needed as you minister in the church and to the families in your church. And so certainly feel free to contact Covenant Eyes at any time. You can connect with our team and others, and we can help resource you, really just talk through ideas and best practices that we've seen, and offer some help and hope in that area. And certainly check out Protect Young Eyes in their site. They're a little more geared toward the family, the younger family, a lot of help with apps and all of those types of things, where we don't typically get into those kinds of things, but certainly would love to help you. So with that, I think, unless there's anything else, Amanda, that you can think of, I think we'll end it here. And please look for that email with recording and the links to come to you shortly. And if you do have any other dying questions or burning questions, feel free to get a hold of us, and we'd love to try and tackle those for you. But we'll end with, God bless your ministry. Thank you for the work that you guys are doing in ministry. And we are here to partner with you. We'd love to help any way we can. So, Amanda, any closing thoughts?
I just want to thank everyone again for joining us for this brief time, but we hope that it really was a fruitful gathering for you, even though we had some unexpected events here. But I think Chris really did offer a lot of nuggets for us to walk away with, from the topic of empathy, the topics of when and how to have the conversations. And we are here and available to assist you in your efforts, your local efforts, and we can jump on individual phone calls, offer consultations to you and your communities. But we are just really grateful for your efforts, and we know that you are the boots on the ground and you are making sacrifices daily, and we pray that the Lord is blessing your efforts, and we know he is. And again, please reach out to us if there's anything that we can do to assist you. So God bless you.
All right. Well, that's it. Well, thank you again for joining us. We'll be putting out our next Pastors Roundtable in a couple of months. So please look for that announcement. With that, have a great afternoon. Take care. God bless.